of the center console that encases the gear shift box. That increases where it goes to the items.
Not actually the cup holder, but it's the cup holder general vicinity, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that directly next to an open container that you located in the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And so when you searched that center console, when you opened up that center console, you had not only everything you had heard Mr. Hankins tell Trooper Rhodes, you also had the information that Trooper Rhodes had given you. You also had marijuana residue in the car, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you had probable cause to look inside that center console, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you did look inside of that, did you find, what kind of casing were the pills that you found? What kind of packaging?
It was a Black and Mild single cigar is what I consider them. Packaging and wrapping that is basically clear cellophane with some commercial identifying one from the manufacturer.
Okay, so it wasn't like a package, it was just a single.
We're attempting to turn the microphone up, so speak up and we're gonna try to turn that up because she's having.
Because you face it that way and so.
I got you. It was in a, the majority of it was a clear cellophane wrapper that was for a Black and Mild cigar with commercial identifying markings on it that was in the center console.
So for just a single Black and Mild cigar?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you locate in the vehicle a single Black and Mild cigar?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that located? And while you were searching the vehicle, did you additionally find any kind of odor masking substances?
Yes, ma'am. Spray bottle that is for like deodorizer in the back pocket in the front driver's side door.
And is it your belief, based on what you observed, that that substance had been sprayed to try to mask the odor of marijuana?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, pass it.
Mr. Head.
Kind of going back in reverse order, I guess, the spray that you found, do you agree with me that the driver's side door was the last place you checked?
Yes, sir.
So you found that last.
Yes, sir.
So that couldn't possibly have contributed to your PC to search other areas.
The location of it, the locating that bottle.
With the fact that you found it after you had searched everything else, you would agree with me that to conduct a legal search, you can't develop PC after the search starts, right?
That depends on how the search began in the first place.
Well, if it's an illegal search when it starts, the fact that you develop PC midway through the search doesn't make the search legitimate from the start, correct?
That is correct.
So my question regarding to the spray in particular is that was found at the very end of the search in the driver's side door, which was the last compartment checked, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that couldn't have possibly contributed to your PC decision regarding the search that was prior to you finding.
Correct.
And we spoke prior to lunch about whether or not you'd seen the video. Did you get a chance to go watch that over that lunch?
I watched a very short portion of the part you were referring to. Yes, sir.
Okay. And you would agree with me that you did in fact find a Black and Mild cigar in the center area around the cup hole.
Yes, sir.
And then it was a partially burned cigar.
Yes, sir.
Did you find ash or residue from the cigar?
If there was ash there, it was not notated. That's not something I'm going to notate as ash from a cigar.
And you did in fact pick up the cigar, smell the cigar, look at the end of the cigar, and then place it back in, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there was nothing about the cigar that appeared improper or illegal.
Correct.
Likewise, you would agree with me during that same episode, you did not say anything about seeing any residue into your body. Is that true?
No, that's false.
You believe you did?
I know I did say it. I watched it and I did say it. Yes, sir.
It's on the audio.
Absolutely.
Okay. And at what point in time did you say that?
Before opening the center console, after lifting up the cup that had the condensation on it, my flashlight pauses over the center console area in the scenes that I just discussed. And in that pause is when I stated.
What exactly did you recall what you said?
I believe it was, there's some green right there, or a little bit of green there.
Now, would you agree with me that prior to searching that area, you had searched the back seat? Would you agree with me that in the back seat, in addition to finding the bottle that Mr. Hankins and Kojo was back there, you searched through 2 plastic bags?
Yes, sir.
And in those bags, there was nothing that appeared to be an open container inside.
Correct.
And in fact, there were some medications, and you read the labels, you looked completely through those bags. That was a search for something other than open containers when you're looking through those bags, isn't it?
No, open containers could be in those boxes.
In the boxes?
Yes.
What type of open container were you looking for in those boxes?
If you've been to a liquor store, behind the counter at the cashier's desk are the very small bottles of liquor. Those can also be considered open containers.
So it's your testimony under oath that in those bags, what you were looking for were open containers of alcohol.
I said they could be present in the bag and in that box.
Well, I'm
That's what-
asking you, is that what you were looking for?
No,
So you were searching for something other than open containers of alcohol.
no. You're,
Well, you just said you were not searching for open containers, but you would agree with me, you were searching the contents of those bags.
yes, sir, but you're attempting to limit the amount I can explain. So, I mean, I can only explain as much as you're giving me the way to do so.
Also, I'm just asking you if you said you were not looking for open containers of alcohol, but you're looking through bags, correct?
Once again, you are expecting me to give you a yes or no answer without further explanation. Therefore, I don't feel comfortable in being able to completely answer that 110%.
Would you agree with me, you did not find any open containers other than the bottle that he indicated and the styrofoam cup in the console?
Yes, sir.
And it does contain the same type of alcohol, in your opinion?
Believe me, yes, sir.
And having gone back and watched the video, do you recall now seeing the portion where you and Trooper Rhodes are discussing the search and y'all specifically discussed looking for drug containers?
No, I went specifically to the portion that you had discussed and asked me to review for me stating that on camera.
So you didn't go back and look at the part where y'all talked about what you were going to be searching for?
Once again, no, sir, I went to the specific portion to show of what I stated.
Okay.
Ms. Heisel?
Just briefly, Your Honor, Trooper Faculty, the marijuana that was in the crevices of the console area, was that burned marijuana or was that fresh marijuana?
Fresh green marijuana.
Yes.
Trooper Bradley, to the best of your recollection, the Trooper Rhodes ever specifically told you to look for drugs in this training? Did you search the center console based on the probable cause derived from your plain view of marijuana residue while looking for it?
Yes, sir.
There are passive.
Did you make any effort at all to photograph the marijuana?
No.
Did you make any effort at all to preserve any of what you see?
No.
If you knew that you saw marijuana, why did you feel it was necessary to pick up this cigar, smell the cigar, and to try to establish probable cause?
I'm sorry, sir.
If you felt like you had already seen marijuana, why did you still feel like it was necessary to pick up the cigar, smell the cigar, look at the end of the cigar? You felt like you had already established probable cause.
Because that would show a pretty close intake of marijuana into his system, which would aid Trooper Rhodes in his DWI investigation.
And do we have any evidence at all that that was actually marijuana, which you felt like might have been marijuana? And did you preserve it in any way whatsoever?
Once again, no.
And did Trooper Rhodes, you said you don't recall him telling you to look for drugs. Did he specifically tell you what you were to look for?
Probable cause for open container.
Which you had already found in the back seat.
And in the front console.
I'll pass it.
No, our state has no further questions for this witness.
Any objection to Trooper Fagley being finally excused? State no.
No objection.
Thank you, Trooper Fagley. You may step down. You're no longer under the rule.
Yes, sir.
State, do you have any additional witnesses or evidence?
No, Your Honor, state of rest.
Mr. Head,
I'm going to ask for the purpose of motion to suppress.
we ready for argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Mr. Head.
Your Honor, we are traffic stop, allegation of speeding. At the time of the stop, there may have initially been suspicion for some questions regarding the DSI. However, Your Honor, I think the case law, as I understand it, is pretty clear that a mere odor of alcohol or an admission of some drink is insufficient to warrant a continued detention for standardized field sobriety testing. Both officers who testified, they observed absolutely no clues for intoxication, no slurred speech, red eyes, bloodshot eyes, staggering, sway, inability to park, inability to follow directions, madness, absolutely nothing to substantiate a continued detention for standardized field sobriety testing. Argument number one is this search resulted as a product of that continued unlawful detention for standardized field sobriety testing. The offense of speeding was complete. The offense of open container had been admitted, and you'd even pointed to where that open container was. They had run his driver's license and heard on the audio saying that he's eligible to drive. At that point in time, in the Florida versus lawyer, the officer is required to write him a citation for open container for speeding and send him on his way. There is no basis for a continued detention to conduct standardized field sobriety testing, which the officers do. And while one officer is telling him to go stand over here for the continued detention and field sobriety testing, Officer Rhodes on the mic is heard telling Officer Fagley or Trooper Fagley, go back and search for open containers, and then your voice gets real quiet, in any sort of drug containers.
Objection, Your Honor, I believe that's the statement at the end.
That's what I thought I heard, right? That's what I asked the officers about. That's our position. And Trooper Rhodes has testified, we did not have probable cause. He felt like we had reasonable suspicion, but not probable cause. There's no basis to conduct a search for reasonable suspicion. There's a basis to conduct a reasonable and kind detention for reasonable suspicion. That time period had expired, and then a search was conducted with a lack of probable cause. The container, Mr. Hankins told the trooper, there is an open container, it's in the back seat. I also found an open container in the front seat. For Your Honor, the search, if the court goes back and looks at the remainder of the video that was admitted in evidence, it's going to show, and Trooper Fagley has confirmed that he initially went to the back passenger side compartment, that he found the bottle, put the bottle there, and then he started looking through items, and then he was not looking for open containers of alcohol. He was looking through bags, looking at medications, reading labels on medication, fumbling through map compartments on the sides of the doors. He was looking in the back pocket of the front passenger seat. Your Honor, all of that search exceeded the scope of a search for an open container. And it was all occurring prior to him getting into the front seat, where he then says that he found something that thought could have possibly been some marijuana residue. Well, residue, number one, is not illegal unless it's a usable quantity. But number two, we have no evidence whatsoever that it was actually marijuana residue. Nothing was seized, no photographs, no testing, no way to determine. The officer actually picked it, really picked up and smelled the cigar, looked at it carefully. There was nothing illegal about that. And yet then he continues his search for items other than open containers. That he looks into the glove box, or the center console rather. There's a tray in there. He manipulates the tray out of the way. There's papers in there. He manipulates those items out of the way, and then finds this small bag which he believes has an illegal substance. You know, we believe all of those things. It's a continuation of an illegal detention and then an illegal search, and a search that exceeds the scope of a lawful detention, exceeds the scope of a lawful search, and only at that point in time does he find what he believes might be contraband. And Your Honor, I understand, you know, it's a harsh remedy, but it's a protection of an individual's Fourth Amendment rights, Mr. Hankins' rights, to be free from illegal search and seizure. I would tell the court it's also less, it's approximately 0.16 grams. It's a very small amount. It's also a teaching opportunity for the court. You know, one of the purposes, one of the reasons for the exclusion is to help guide officers to not skip steps, to not do things that result in illegal searches. And this is a fairly small amount, but it's an opportunity for the court to uphold the Constitution and to let the officers know there's a better way to do this, a legal way to do this on other occasions, so that it doesn't happen again. Now, based on all those things, we believe the state itself makes it a burden under the law that this was a reasonable search under the United States Constitution, the Texas Constitution. We're asking that our motion be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Head. Seisel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge, Mr. Evans touched on a handful of things that I just want to briefly touch on. As for the actual stop, Your Honor, being extended, I would first like to say that Mr. Hankins, by his own admission through the video being played, had multiple traffic warrants. And just because that it was the policy of our county jail not to take people into that, does not mean that that was not a lawful option available to the officers Furthermore, the speeding ticket had not been issued yet, therefore, the reason for the stop had not been concluded. There had been no official citation issued, Mr. Hankins, at the time of all of this interview session and ultimately search, Your Honor. Your Honor, DPS, if they are going to put somebody back on the road after an investigation, especially when there's already been admission of an open container in the vehicle, cannot put that person back on the road until they have assured that there are no additional open containers in the vehicle. And in this specific case, there was more than one open container in the vehicle, leading Trooper Bagley to have probable cause to continue to search for additional open containers. Your Honor, there was a lot of mention made about how do we even know that it was marijuana? And my assertion to you would be that these troopers, they encounter marijuana, I would say it's fairly safe to say almost on a daily basis. They know what marijuana is and isn't, Your Honor. And as far as not knowing what it is, probable cause does not require analysis of drugs from a drug lab to give probable cause to search. That's absolutely just beyond the bounds of reason, Your Honor, to expect that from a trooper on the scene. They know what marijuana residue is. They know how it smells. They know how it looks. They know how it feels. And Mr. Head has made a lot of arguments and talked about a lot of different things, but Your Honor, this is very simple. Trooper Rhodes' probable cause for the open container, plus Trooper Bagley's plain view observation of marijuana residue in the car, gave the DPS trooper probable cause to search any container in that vehicle that might contain marijuana. We believe this was not only lawful, that it was reasonable search, and we would ask that you deny the motion to suppress.
Thank you, Ms. Heisel. Mr. Head, you want to respond at all? All right, thank you. All right, the court's going to take the motion under advisement. The court's going to review the video and arguments of counsel. If there's any supporting case law that you want to submit to the court, I would invite that. And if you also have proposed orders, you're welcome to send that to the court as well. Let's schedule Mr. Hankins for a status on the court's ruling. Mr. Head, are you available on April 27th?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe that's a Monday, isn't it?
No, it'd be a Tuesday.
Tuesday. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The court will set Mr. Hankins then for a status on the court's ruling on the motion to suppress at 9 a.m.
Your Honor, do you want us to do a reset?
Yes, if you don't mind. And if Mr. Hankins wants to appear via Zoom that day, since it's not a docket call setting, he can do so.
Thank you.
Ms. Tabraham.
Yes, sir.
Are we ready?
They went back to get our 3, so we should be in about 2 minutes.
Okay. We'll take up, is Mr. Manning there on Mr. Villarreal?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we have Mr. Hansard. And who else do we have? Is that all?
SETT set of gas with Bill Stevens.
Oh, there's an agreed order on that, do you have that as well? Mr. With, you want Mr. Villarreal present for that? Okay,
I think Mr. Manning is speaking to him about the agreement.
okay, okay. Did you hear that, Ms. Abraham?
No, sir.
The state indicated that they do have an agreement. They've already submitted an agreement on Mr. Sedagas, and they believe they have agreement with Mr. Villarreal. So, but we're still going to bring Mr. Villarreal up.
Okay, and do you have Mr. Gimbel?
You know, just.
I apologize, Your Honor. Mr. Hankins was just asking, is this the program not 15 or 18 way? And would that be sufficient until it comes back to court? 7?
I'll leave that up to the probation department.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Abraham.
Do you have Mr. Gimbel on Zoom or he's not?
He's here. He's here in the courtroom.
Okay. They thought he was coming out to speak to Mr. Hanser.
I believe he did that over the lunch period. Is that right, Mr. Gimbel?
Your Honor, they had taken staff to jail, had already prepared to feed everybody lunch, and so all the inmates were.
Yeah, they feed from 11 to 1, I believe. So, okay.
I didn't make it over there quick enough, so no, sir, I have not met Mr.
Okay. So we're just going to conduct our hearing.
Hanson.
Okay. All right. So we'll take up Mr. Villarreal first, and then we'll take up Mr. Hanser. That was a probation extension. Yes, we handled that one. And I sent her to talk with probation, and then I just let her go. Remember, she was the one that said that her probation officer told her to ask me if something was okay.
With Mr. Villarreal? All right, come on up, sir.
All right, good afternoon. This is writ number WR 20-48, Sergio Villarreal. And this is, I believe, a pre-indictment motion to dismiss. And Mr. Woodwalk, you said that y'all had an agreement.
Judge, I believe we have an agreement that Mr. Manning is indeed correct. Mr. Villarreal has been in our jail for approaching a year. I would disagree to the extent that there was a PR1 granted in October, but because of his it was then by agreement revoked, but it has been an additional, I believe, 6 months since that period. We would agree to able to submit a disposition. We are basically rejecting his case pending further investigation by the APS lab. And then we will reinstigate this prosecution at that time if the evidence supports it. I've spoken with Mr. Manning. I've given him the option of moving again, agreed to PR Mullins, whether it's in Mr. Villarreal's best interest. He believes that the rejection of our case at this time and further investigation is in his best interest. That will release our hold. He can go, and we also has the Dallas hold and a parole hold, so he can go ahead and those businesses until we can figure it out from the EPS lab. Contents.
Okay. So the court will sign the order that Mr. Manning has submitted dismissing the prosecution.
Yes, sir.
Or Mr. Manning, I'm signing this as we speak, and I will have the staff send that over to the jail.
And Judge, just procedurally, would you like for me to go ahead and submit my bill, or would you like for me to remain on the case pending some further result by the state?
I believe that this resolves the case right now. So I would go ahead and submit your bill. And then if there's a new case, then that will go through the process of appointment of an attorney. And I'm sure that Ms. Abraham would review that and find that you were the previous attorney and likely reappoint you. But I would go ahead and submit your bill. That way, if it never comes to fruition, then you're aware.
Excellent, Judge. I appreciate it. I believe that concludes my business. May I be excused?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Did you just have an order? Go back over and check the day. And process. Okay. Oh, is this yours?
All right, so Mr. Hansard.
Come on, sir. Gentlemen, you still are in court, so I'm going to ask you to please comply. Yes.
Is Mr. Hansard the last individual remaining on our docket?
Judge, I do believe he is.
Okay.
Your Honor, we have Mr. Pendergast in here as well.
No. Yes, and we've already, I believe I've already signed an order. There was an agreed order submitted earlier on his case. So I've signed that. I don't recollect what it is because it's already been filed. But it was agreed between Mr. Stevens, his attorney, and the state. So I've signed that and given that to the clerks. So we no longer need Mr. Settegast.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Hansard. All right, let's, if we can give Mr. Hansard a chair, it's going to be, we're going to take some testimony, I believe. So you're going to want to get comfortable. So we can move him closer to the, there you go. And if you want to, you can move that podium and get to where we can see, you can see us and hear us okay. And if you can't hear us, you let us know, okay?
Yes, sir. It's okay.
Yes, and can you see Mr. Gamble? He's going to be in the one called 294 District Court. He's sitting at council table here. Can you see him? You see him waving there?
No, sir.
All right, I'll tell you what.
The BD guy back there? Yes, yes, sir, I see him.
Okay. Whenever, is there someone in the courtroom with you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Miss Patty, if you will, if you'll just hover your mouse over the 294th District Court. If you want to, you can right click that and pin that screen, and it will enlarge that screen for Mr. Hansard so that he can see the courtroom, and then I'll be up on the top of that. Is that better?
Yes, sir, I see him.
Okay. And Mr. Gimbel, make sure your microphone is on and close to you, because that's where all the audio is going to get to Mr. Hansard.
It's not, it'll show green.
All of our audio goes through the microphones and then ties into this computer, which, there we go. Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Gimbel, I believe that you filed a motion to suppress evidence on February 10th. Court has reviewed your motion to suppress.
And Your Honor, this is with the state regarding the matter. I don't believe we have extra matters. The state reviewed just language in the statute and practice that governs primarily what they issue here, left-hand terms, and the language from the governor on the requirement of registration. But both of the articles and the language that governs the issues in its traffic stop are very ambiguous.
Okay. All right. And are you going to put on any testimony today?
I believe the state and or we would call a Sergeant Law.
Judge Stevens stipulated this was warrantless arrest.
Okay. All right. Do you want any opening argument at this time?
No, I would just say.
Okay.
Judge Stevens called Sergeant Aaron Long.
All right. Sergeant Long?
And Judge Martin,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Honor, but we're having a difficult time hearing the counselors. I don't know if they could try to utilize their microphones a little bit more.
Deputy McLeish, can you hear me better?
Can you hear it a little bit better? Try again, Mr. Woodwhite.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Okay, we can hear you, sir. Mr. Gamble, would you test your microphone, please?
When I speak, I speak directly into the microphone. If you can hear me now.
He says that's a little bit better. Yes, sir. If you guys, again, I apologize, but if you can just concentrate on using those. If you have problems.
And
Thank
Joe,
you, gentlemen.
there's a couple boundary mics in there. Can we just go ahead and pull those out, and we'll just put those on the table as well, and maybe they'll pick up better than. Sergeant, come on up while we're doing this. I'll go ahead and swear you in, sir. You'll raise your right hand and place you under oath. Sir, do you swear that the testimony you give to the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat. You may have been in here earlier today when I gave other testifying officers some instructions on their testimony. Make sure you speak up loudly and clearly into the microphone. Obviously, you can see we're having some microphone difficulties. If you hear an emergency vehicle or a loud truck go by during your testimony, just wait for that to pass so that everyone can hear. Allow the attorneys to fully ask their question before you answer, and they're going to extend that same courtesy to you. Talking over one another while I can sit here and understand and disseminate what's going on, it's very difficult for my court reporter to put that down in a sentence format. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Woodbine.
Thank you, Mr. Hester, can you hear me now?
Mr. Hanser, can you hear?
Yes.
He said yes. Go ahead.
Would you please state your name?
Yes, sir. It's Aaron Long.
How are you?
I'm employed with the City of Wolf Point Police Department.
What are your duties? with those documents?
For the duties of the city of Willis Point, I'm the sergeant, canine handler, and narcotics officer.
On I believe it's 5/16/2020. Did you come into contact with Mr. Hansard?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and what was the genesis of your contact with Mr. Hansard?
Mr. Hansard was operating a motor vehicle and conducted 2 traffic violations per the Texas State Transportation Code.
Okay, so why don't you kind of describe the direction of travel, place of the vehicle, you came into contact with, at that time, you didn't know it.
Correct.
You weren't looking.
No pre-existing knowledge, no, sir.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Let him finish asking, let him pause, and then you go, because y'all
Okay,
start talking,
I'll apologize.
y'all start talking over one another. So it's gonna be hard for her to write that down, okay? So he's gonna stop, and when he stops, give it a second, and vice versa. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So if you would describe the locations, vehicles, direction of travel.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hansard was, the suspected vehicle was sitting number 1 in the southbound lane of North 4th Street at Highway 80. At the point of time, the light turned red, from red to green. Mr. Hansard made a left-hand turn, failing to turn completely into the innermost lane by the Texas Transportation Code. I want to say it's 545-101 says that you shall turn the innermost lane when applicable. There was no oncoming traffic. There was no reason for him not to turn into that lane and continue traveling. At that point, the suspect, later found as Mr. Hansard, then began traveling in both lanes of the eastbound 1 and 2 lane. At that point, I fell in behind him and then ran the registration on the tag, or the tag number. And at that point, come to find that the registration was expired in July of 2019. At that point, I conducted a traffic stop.
And I believe, and Mr. Greenville, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the extent of the motion today. So that's about as far as we're gonna go. Is that all right? So you witnessed him turn from southbound, Williams at 4th Street?
Correct.
Okay, and then he turns east onto Highway 8.
Correct.
Just so I can make sure I understand in my head. I believe you said you ran the vehicle. Okay, what does that mean?
At that point in time, I entered the license plate numbers into our MDT computer system known as COPSIM. At that point in time, I received a return that showed that the said vehicle tags on it were expired July of 2019.
Okay, and like we said, this was May of 2022.
Correct.
Sergeant Long, you are issued a in-car camera system, is that correct?
Correct.
You included with your offense report a copy of that video, is that correct?
Correct.
Judge, I see you left the video at my office. I have a video for Mr. Gimble's other client, but I failed to bring that one. I've spoken with Mr. Gimble. I believe that he will stipulate for the purposes of this hearing alone. We're just going to submit that to the court. So the court can watch it and it's I just failed to bring it with me today. I can go back to my office break. I don't believe either state or defense would like to take the court's time to watch it right now while everyone's sitting here. We would enter a statement to want to have it with me. Officer Long's in-car video from question.
What's the purpose of the video? I mean, if the facts are agreed and stipulated to that, as Mr. Gimble said, does the court need to view the video?
Judge, I was just going to submit it for the court's edification. If the court wishes to view it, if the court's convinced based on testimony, the state's going to hold that as well.
Now, I'll view the video if you think that there's something if there's an argument about a question of fact, in there that would decide a legal issue, then I'd be happy to watch it. If not, then if it's just a question of law and there's an agreed stipulation on what occurred, then you can offer it if you want, but I don't feel the need.
That's correct, Your Honor.
What's correct?
The argument is not over the facts. Both the defense and the state stipulate as what the facts are in the video. It's the interpretation of the language of the statute.
We both, he turned from left turn lane, traveling down 4th Street. He turned basically wide into the right-hand lane, kind of cutting across the inside left lane into the right-hand lane traffic.
On Highway 80?
On Highway 80, headed east towards Smith County Tower, eventually, towards Fruitvale.
Okay.
Sergeant Long, did you witness any other traffic violations? I witnessed there were 2.
Yes, sir. And with him turning south onto eastbound Highway 80, at the point of failing to turn the innermost lane, he cut the lane of travel, began traveling on the number 1 and number 2 lane eastbound, as well as in the transportation code, it states that you shall not change lanes 100 feet before or 100 feet after an intersection. And with this point, we were still considered at the intersection.
Okay, and you are describing lane number 1 and number 2.
The left lane and the right lane.
Right lane, left lane is number
Number
1,
one,
right lane is number 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you would assert that there was also a failure to maintain a single lane or changing lane within a prescribed distance from the intersection.
Correct, yes, sir. It actually falls under both in the transportation code.
Mr. Gimbel?
Afternoon, Sergeant Long.
Afternoon, sir.
My name is Rick Gamble. I'm the attorney for Mr. Hankins. And just have a few questions, and most of it is to clarify the transportation code, the language in, I think, section 544, subchapter C, section A 545-101 addresses turning and signals for stopping and turning. Are you familiar with that? I'm sure.
Correct.
You reviewed this section of the code. You had mentioned or stated in testimony that when a driver is executing a left-hand turn, they're supposed to go to the innermost lane.
Correct.
And I'm reading a copy of the code in front of me, and I don't see that language in there. The language I see, leave the intersection so as to arrive at a lane lawfully available.
In section 545.101, turning at an intersection, section 2 and 2C state, after entering the intersection, turning left, leaving the intersection so you arrive in a lane lawfully available to moving to the direction of the other vehicle on the roadway. C, on a street or roadway designated a 2-way traffic, the operator turning left shall, to the extent practical, turn in the portion of the intersection to the left of the center of the intersection. So therefore, you shall turn to the innermost lane. Shall being by the Texas Penal Code, you must.
Thank you for your clarification. Also, Sergeant Long, you mentioned that Top Sync is the site that is used by DPS troopers to verify registration, license plates, and the vehicle data.
To clarify that, I did not specifically state DPS. We, as the city of Wills Point, use CopSync, which is a national MDT reporting system.
My apologies, Sergeant Long. Law enforcement uses CopSync to verify registration and insurance status of vehicles. Is that correct?
Status of persons, of eligibility, non-eligibility, wanted, not wanted, or vehicle registrations.
Does CopSync still currently give notice of out-of-date registrations for vehicles?
Correct, yes, sir. I actually even have your subject's vehicle and his license information as of Friday updated, yes, sir.
So CopSync never, I guess, received notice from the governor that on March 16th of last year, he shut down the waived the renewal requirement for vehicle registration due to the COVID crisis.
You are correct. On March 16th, the governor, Greg Abbott, did give a waiver to renew vehicle registration or to transfer titles, but does not state that you cannot be pulled over for these said violations.
Pardon my ignorance, what would be the need to pull somebody over if the governor waived the requirement to renew the registration?
The newer registration began on March 16th, 2020. Therefore, your subject's vehicle registration was July of 2019, which was 7.5 months prior to this order being given. And it states right here, I do have this as well, if you need to enter this. It states down here at the bottom, the temporary extension to renew, this is from the Governor Act by the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. States.
And you can take your time reading.
Okay, no, that's, I talk fast, I'm sorry. The temporary extension to renew registration means vehicle owners should not receive a citation for expired registration regardless when their registration expired. So it says you should not receive a citation, does not state that you cannot conduct a lawful stop for that investigation.
Thank you, sir. Someone, are you aware of the application of several of the transportation code laws, which you made reference to driving in the innermost or outermost, the passing lane or the slow lane? Are you familiar with the application of laws of vehicles being stopped because they're traveling in the fast lane?
There is a state law that says if you're traveling left lane without passing, but there is subsections to that of when and when you cannot be stopped for that.
And I suppose, for the ambiguity of the language in that statute is what Mr. Woodwick and I were discussing. The one statute says that a vehicle is not supposed to travel in the fast lane, but that's the lane that my client turned in.
Free to speak, man.
Please.
With traveling the left lane without passing is considered on a multi-lane divided highway, not incorporated in municipality or city limits. So therefore, that's why yours was not stopped for traveling left lane without passing. Inside a municipality, in a non-divided highway, you can travel in the left lane.
Absolutely, sure.
State,
Judge, I don't believe I have any further questions.
any objection to Sergeant Long being finally excused?
No, Your Honor.
No, okay, Your Honor.
Sergeant, you're free to go. Thank you, sir. State, any additional witnesses or evidence?
Stick with rest as to the motions.
Mr. Kimball?
It's just, no witnesses, just closing argument.
Go ahead.
Sergeant Long of the Williamsport PD stated his cause for the initial cause for the traffic stop of the Chevy Blazer was it failed to turn into the innermost lane. And the language in the code says in order to execute a left-hand turn or right-hand, according to my reading of the statute, turn into a lane. Lawfully available to traffic moving in the direction of the vehicle. A lane to me is different than D lane, the specific innermost or outermost. But one section of the code can specify a lane and a different section of the code can specify the innermost or the outermost lane. I have other clients in multiple counties where different law enforcement have made traffic stops because, and I'm quoting one right up here in Canton, where they observed a vehicle approaching in an inside fast lane with no other vehicles keeping the vehicle from using the outside traffic, which would raise the question, at what point is it okay to drive in the fast lane, or do you have to go directly to the slow lane? And when you're making a turn, it's just ambiguous at best. And as far as the registration being out of date, that was clearly waived by Governor Abbott in March 16th, 2020, due to the coronavirus, and it is not due to end the waiver until mid-April. So next month, we will all have to renew our registration and inspections and so forth. That'll be next month. This traffic stop was 2 months into the waiver. So according to Governor Abbott, people didn't have to renew their plates. We would ask the court to, in its wisdom, exercise its judgment in suppressing this traffic stop and all the evidence that came from it. We would ask the court to grant the motion to suppress and let Mr. Hansard know that he doesn't have to be subdued to illegal search.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Mr. Woodwhite?
I'm gonna remain seated just for.
Okay.
Judge, I believe Sergeant Long enunciated a number of traffic violations that give rise to reasonable suspicion to pulling over the defendant. I would agree that there is some limited ambiguity as to the governor's order. I believe Sergeant Long has eminent good faith reliance on his understanding of that order to rely on, in addition to the, I believe, 2 other reasons to stop the defendant. We would ask that this motion is suppressed.
Have either one of you reviewed the transportation code that Sergeant Long referenced, 545-101, subsection
Judge, I have.
C?
I believe Mr. Gibbon and I both have. This is turning into the intersection.
No, and I have it here. I just didn't know if y'all reviewed it. So if you have it, let's review it together. So subsection here, go ahead and step back so Mr. Hansard can see y'all. There you go. I just want to make sure you have it. So subsection C says, on a street or roadway designated for two-way traffic, and I'm presuming that my knowledge of Highway 80 is that it would be a street or roadway designated for two-way traffic, that the operator turning left, and that's the agreed facts here, is that Mr. Hansard was turning left. He was exiting 4th Street and onto Highway 80, turning eastbound.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then, okay, so Highway 80 is 2-lane.
It's an undivided two-way highway.
Says the operator turning left shall, to the extent practicable, which I'm assuming would mean depending on traffic flow and if the lane was available or not available, to the extent practicable, turn in the portion of the intersection to the left of the center of the intersection. Turn in the portion of the intersection to the left of the center of the intersection. What's your interpretation of that, Mr. Woodwhite?
Judge, that my interpretation of that is into the left lane. It doesn't make a lot of sense that turning left and center means turning into oncoming lanes. So I would interpret the only rational, reasonable interpretation of that section is turning to the leftmost lane possible.
Mr. Gimbel?
Your Honor, it seems to me that whoever drafted the transportation code must be sharing a room with people who drafted the tax code.
Okay.
Your Honor, there were no other the violations that Sergeant Long referred to, the additional, and Mr. Woodward referred to additional traffic violations. They were not reported. They weren't listed as calls. They weren't, reported in the police report. And as far as the consideration of the training and experience of Sergeant Long's understanding of the traffic code, if the language in the code is ambiguous, we would just ask the court for clarity for future training of the current and future officers for ease of understanding.
And Sergeant Long, well, I don't know that Sergeant Long testified to this, but I believe that in your motion you laid out, I didn't hear any testimony on it, but I guess in your motion, it says that there was a passenger. Is there an agreement that there's a passenger who stated that the vehicle had been purchased 1 week prior to the traffic stop in May of 2020?
Judge, I believe the statement stipulated that she did make that statement. However, at the time of the stop, Sergeant Long has no indication who owns the vehicle.
Correct.
Related to the fee, which was suspicious of stops and kind of.
Well, and that was my question. So Sergeant Long doesn't know. He just knows that the registration was expired in 2019 before COVID.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. All right. Court's going to take it under advisement. Court's going to review the motion, and I'm going to spend some time reviewing the transportation code, and I'll issue my ruling shortly. I'll issue that in writing. Let's see if Mr. Hansard, is he set for any other settings at this time?
No, Your Honor, we have no current state.
All right. Are you available? Do you know the next time that you're going to be here, Mr. Gimbel?
April 5th and April 7th. April 7th would probably be best.
I don't think you'll be here April 7th. That's right in the middle of our jury trial. Could be May 7th? It's not May 7th either. You may be downstairs with Judge Winters. That's likely. That's likely. He usually has criminal on Wednesdays. Are you available on either April 13th or 15th?
I will be here on the 3rd.
13th? Okay. All right. Then the court's going to set Mr. Hansard then for docket call and ruling status on the ruling of the motion to suppress.
Will that be at 1:30?
That'll be at 1:30. All right, Mr. Hansard, were you able to hear everything okay today in court? Say that again, sir.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I have, I'm going to take Mr. Gimbel and your motion to suppress under advisement. I'm going to review the law on that. And then we'll see you back on April 13th at 1:30, and I will have a ruling for you by then. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Have a good day, sir.
You too, sir.
I believe that concludes the court's docket today. Is there anything else that we need to take up? On Mr. Manning's? Yes, he submitted a proposed order, so I signed that.
Okay, I didn't know if it's.
He did, and I signed it. So we're good to go on that.
The matter of housekeeping on this, Mr. Motion has both a granted and denied law. So is it necessary to state father order on that, or is it?
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of a proposed order that would contain sufficient findings of fact, conclusions of law. The state's assertions. All right, jail court, do we need anything? Do we need any extraditions or anyone to be?
Lieutenant Harrelson would like to speak with you. She's in the room.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let me clear the courtroom real quick and shut all this down, and then we'll have that discussion.